Hey guys, I am Lynn Hanson, one of the pastors here at North Park Church, and I'm really glad to be sharing with you in our life groups this week. Our current teaching theme is Wizard, and this last weekend, we talked specifically about having a mind that's free and how that is a great influence on other people when our minds are free. More than anything else, it seems that the reason that people give me for not wanting much to do with God is that they don't see anything real in a relationship with God, and they don't see anything real in the people of God who are trying to influence them. And so we're trying to talk about that and talk about it with some open honesty, and maybe the reasons that people are not influenced by us like we would like them to be has a lot more to do with us than them. But this week, in our life groups, we're going to be talking about this business of having a mind that's free. The Bible says if the Son sets you free, that's Jesus, then you're free indeed. And that has to do with a real life, authentic relationship with Jesus, not this silly, rules and religion deal. Now, some of you might have heard of Nebuchadnezzar, and that's who we're going to be looking at in our life groups this week. He's a very famous king of Babylon. He was Babylon's leader, really, in all of its greatness, the one who was in power when Babylon was built up to a world empire. And you think about the Hanging Gardens of Babylon and all of those great things from the seven ancient wonders of the world, and those things happened under Nebuchadnezzar's rule as king of Babylon. And, the thing about it is, though, with all of his greatness and influence, the most probably powerful person in the world back about 600 or 700 BC. But as we often say, all the talent in the world, all the brains in the world, all the giftedness in the universe is worthless if a person's mind is held captive to something evil. And so there's really three components to storying. We're going to look at his story here in just a minute, or a little bit of it anyway. But there's three components to that. I'm going to read the story to you. Then somebody's going to set down their notes in your group and retell the story from memory. And then the rest of you are going to add in what they might have forgotten, and you're going to all together then rebuild that story. And we're going to get some great things out of it through our life groups this week. Are you ready for that? Good deal. The first thing I'm going to do is tell you the story. This is from Daniel chapter 4, the Old Testament. Daniel chapter 4, verse 28 is where it starts. Let me just tell you one thing as some background. The prophet Daniel had told Nebuchadnezzar, if you don't give praise to God, and if you don't turn your life and your heart, your mind toward Him, then these terrible things are going to happen to you. You're going to get all messed up and confused. And so, Nebuchadnezzar didn't believe him, and so here's what happened. All these things did happen to King Nebuchadnezzar. 12 months later, he was taking a walk on the flat roof of the royal palace in Babylon. As he looked out across the city, he said, "Look at this great city of Babylon. By my own mighty power, I have built this beautiful city as my royal residence to display my majestic splendor." While these words were still in his mouth, a voice called down from heaven, "O King Nebuchadnezzar, this message is for you. You are no longer ruler of this kingdom. You will be driven from human society. You will live in the fields with the wild animals. You will be driven, you will eat grass like a cow. 7 periods of time, that's 7 years, will pass while you live this way, until you learn that the Most High rules over the kingdoms of the world and gives them to anyone He chooses." That same hour the judgment was fulfilled, and Nebuchadnezzar was driven from human society. He ate grass like a cow, and he was drenched with the dew of heaven. He lived this way until his hair was as long as eagle's feathers, and his nails were like birds' claws. After this time passed, I, Nebuchadnezzar, looked up to heaven. My sanity returned, and I praised and worshipped the Most High, and honored the one who lives forever. His rule is everlasting, and his kingdom is eternal. Daniel 4:28 through 34. Now, if you just take that, somebody set your notes down or your Bible down and retell that story as best you can, and the rest of you rebuild that story. Go ahead and do that now, please. All right, great. I hope you had a super good time retelling that story and rebuilding that story. Discussion question number 1. What do you think the primary meaning of the story is? What do you think the primary meaning is? Go ahead and talk about that, please. All right, I'd like you to, if you would please, look back at verse 33 of the story. Put your eye on that. Very important verse there. It says, that same hour judgment was fulfilled, and Nebuchadnezzar was driven from human society. He ate grass like a cow. He was drenched in the dew of heaven. He lived this way until his hair was as long as eagle's feathers. His nails were like birds' claws. Interesting, weird verse, but think about it with me. What is God saying there? King Nebuchadnezzar, perhaps the most powerful, influential man on earth. Well, hands down, he was the most powerful, influential man on the face of the earth. And he was reduced to living like an animal. Now, think about that, guys. This is about you and this is about me. And so, question 2, has the insanity of living away from God ever caused you to live like an animal? Think about it. Pray about it a moment. Has the insanity of living away from God ever caused you, living for yourself instead of Him, ever caused you to live like an animal? And the question then is, in what way? How did that look? And what traits did you have that were like an animal? Go ahead and discuss that. Talk about that openly, would you please? All right, question number 3, down to the nitty-gritty a little bit here. What was the result of living that way, living like an animal? You know, the question is, what did God accomplish through that in your life? Did He accomplish something through it? What was it? Go ahead and talk about that, please. All right, we're going to look back at verse 34 there. Would you put your eye on verse 34 and notice that after this time had passed, Nebuchadnezzar looked up to heaven, his sanity returned, he praised and worshiped the Most High. Now, very cool verse. Living this way, living like an animal, living away from God, caused Nebuchadnezzar finally to look up to heaven. And when we hear the word look to in the Bible, it often refers to what we're dependent on. What are you looking to support you? What are you looking to give you meaning and value and purpose in your life? And so he looked up to heaven. He wasn't looking to himself any longer, or looking to his accomplishments, or looking to his performance like Simon did in our weekend story. This is an amazing thing, you know. You think about the prodigal son in Luke chapter 15, and maybe you want to make a note and read that later. Same thing happened with him. He came to his senses, and he looked back to his father. Same thing here. Nebuchadnezzar looked up to heaven. And then what happened? To declare God to be the ruler over his life and his kingdom instead of himself. That's what took place. Living this way caused him to look up to heaven and to really say to God and to say to the people around him that God, Jesus, is the ruler over his life and his kingdom, and no longer he himself. Do you see that? And so if the Son sets you free, you'll be free indeed. And Nebuchadnezzar's mind was freed at this point. We've been saying all the way through this series, we've only done it for a couple weeks, but we've been saying through the series that when you try to influence people for yourself, there's going to be a lot of holes in it, right? And when you influence others for Jesus, it's airtight. And, that was Nebuchadnezzar's problem. He was trying to influence others for himself. He's saying, look at all of this. Look at what I've done. And, a person can't stand up to that. He just broke under that kind of pressure and lost his mind. His mind was burdened by that kind of pride and that kind of self-dependence. And so when you try to influence people for Jesus, it's airtight, and that's where he ends up at the last part of this verse. Question 4, how would you say that that truth fits Nebuchadnezzar's story? When you influence others for Jesus, it's airtight. When you try to influence others for yourself, there's going to be holes in it. How would you say that truth fits Nebuchadnezzar's story? Go ahead and just talk about that. Look back at it, dig in, and to explain how that works in his story. Go ahead, please. All right, time to finish up. Yes, one more question this week in our life groups. Verse 34 again, just a super amazing verse. I just love it so much. Look back at it, and considering what God taught you through life group this week, do you need to look up to heaven like it says in verse 34? Is there some area of your life where you need to exchange self-worship for the worship of the Most High Jesus? Well, guys, have the rest of a great life group, and I'll see you soon.